Nintendo just recently released Metroid Dread, and once again, Samus is on her 5th canonical mission to fight aliens that she thought was dead. But this time, there's something a little bit off, and there's a little bit of dread that's being brought to Samus's life. But is the game worth playing? Let's talk about that today on Geek Devotions. Hello Devoted Geeks, welcome to Geek Devotions, a show from Devoted Geeks who are devoted to letting you know that you are loved. I'm Dallas, I'm so glad you hit the play button today. If you're new to our show, we take geek pop culture items like movies, video games, and comic books, we use them to let people know that they're loved. So if you don't watch past this moment, know this, we love you, we care about you. There is a plan and a purpose for your life. As a cinema intro, today we're going to be reviewing Metroid Dread. For this review, we're going to be talking about the actual gameplay, the mechanics of the game. We're also going to be talking about, however, what it's like to play on different types of controllers and the differences of playing it between the regular Switch and the new OLED Switch. To my right, you'll see a list of time codes for all these things. There will also be time codes listed in the description down below. We will be wrapping up the review with my final thoughts on the game. Now, it's going to be extended, I'm going to explain a bit of things, but if you just want a quick yes or no, yes, go play it. In a review. Metroid Dread is the first 2D side-scrolling Metroid we've had in a very, very long time. I know a lot of fans were really rooting for another Metroid Prime, however, I really think that they did a great job. In fact, while I was playing this particular game on my stream, one of the people in my chat talked about how the game itself gave them some really nice old school Nintendo feels in all the right ways. While it still looked very clean and very fresh for today's audience, the way that the game itself is built with the side-scrolling hits all the right nostalgic buttons that a more mature player would want to have, but at the same time really draws some of the younger crowd. Through and through, the graphics are beautiful. From cutscenes to actual gameplay, everything just looks and feels nice. The colors are right, there's glow to the atmosphere. Even when you get down to other aspects of Dread, things are purely beautiful. The game is, of course, called Metroid Dread, and with that title, there is some legitimate dread. There are some legitimate heart-pounding, exciting moments as you play. You have these robots that you have to face off on a regular basis called Emmys, and when you enter into their zone, guys, it gets wild, absolutely wild. As the screen begins to darken, there's an eerie grain, and then the music begins to swell, adding to the tension and anxiety of the moment in all the right ways. One individual in my chat even made a comment or a joke about how it's not Five Nights at Freddy's, it's Five Nights of Metroid. I'm telling you guys, it was, yeah, these robots are terrifying. The dread and excitement of the game is only highlighted by the soundtrack, as you have this beautiful atmospheric music that takes place the entire time. The areas just seem to match right with really great sound effects of dripping noises and certain other kind of gross creatures that pop out. It is absolutely a beautiful time playing this game, both visually and with your hearing. Part of the beauty is all of the cutscenes that take place within the game. Now, while the intro is a bit long for some people, it sets up a lot of great story, but visually, it's a beautiful thing. And then as you play the game, there are moments where you have these cutscenes that come in. And to be honest, I feel like they're very organic. I feel like they flow in really nicely in with the rest of the gameplay. Now, the actual gameplay, you actually playing the game, what's that like? I'm telling you guys, it's smooth, like butter. It's a fantastic game to play. Samus runs back and forth real smoothly. The actions of being able to slide across the floor and jump and do everything, it's very organic and it feels nice. It's really well built. The only issue I really have with some of the gameplay is the aiming. There is now a new mechanic where you're able to freely aim around the room, and depending on your joystick that you're using, it's a little bit difficult to be able to really get to certain areas. However, generally when you're aiming, you're using a charge beam or a missile, which creates a bigger hitbox, so that kind of compensates for some of those issues. Now the question becomes, how do you play the game itself? How are you controlling Samus? And for the purpose of the review, I did it in a few different ways. First off, I use these two things. I have it's an off-brand Pro controller, but then I use my Joy-Cons in the dock to see how they play out. I start off with playing with one of my Pro controllers, and as a feel for everything, it just felt right as you're playing through. The buttons were in good spacing, and everything was working functionally and really smooth. Then I made a switch over to the Joy-Cons. I will say that when I switched over to this, that I had some issues. Now, some of that is simply from going from controller to controller. Obviously, this is highly different from playing with a Pro controller. Everything's a little bit comes together a bit smaller, so it takes a little bit while of playing. So after about an hour gameplay using exclusively this, I got a feel for it. I will say that the certain commands that you have to use when you're playing the game, This is a little bit more difficult to be able to access the buttons properly to really be able to play the game in its fullness. It's doable, it's functional, it works great, but it is better if you have a secondary controller. The third way of doing things was for me to actually dock the Joy-Cons on the actual Switch and go mobile with it. The switch up again, you gotta adjust a little bit. I don't have one of those really nice fancy grips that people put on there. I think they're called like SATA grips or something like that. Nintendo's put out a version, a couple of people. Would love to get my hands on one of those one day. But as far as functionality with it, it wasn't bad. There was a little bit of tightness in my hands just a little bit because I got big hands and as I'm playing it. But again, after a few minutes of playing it, it became very natural and very smooth. One of my issues with a lot of reviews out there about Nintendo games is simply this. Most of the time, all they do is talk about the actual game, but they don't talk about the experience from a TV to versus the handheld experience. To me, these are major differences. When you're on a TV, it's a little bit bigger screen, you see things a little bit differently, you see things better and smoother. Whereas on handheld, well, it's a little bit of a different animal. So I specifically went handheld to figure out what this like. Now, when you boot up the game, you do have to tone down your darkness to a certain level for the game. They prompt you to do this. Switching from my TV to my Switch, I had to make the adjustments again. Why? Because the Switch isn't as bright as my TV. That's why. Plain and simple. But after making the adjustments and beginning to play the game, I did notice it was a little bit different. Obviously, things are a little bit tighter. There's a smaller screen. It was a little bit harder to see certain details that I was able to see really easily on my larger screen. But it was completely functional, and it was a good experience. It was fun. To be perfectly honest with you, playing it on handheld was a rush of nostalgia for me. My very first Metroid game was actually Metroid 2 on my Game Boy. So being able to play that in the handheld experience, wherever I'm at, was a really great experience for me personally as a player. And I think for other individuals, they will be able to sit down and enjoy playing it wherever they're at also. But what about playing it on the new Nintendo Switch OLED? It's supposed to be a bigger screen, it's brighter, it's louder. Is it a better experience? Well, I don't personally have one, so I reached out to my good friend LJ Lowry, president of Geeks Under Grace, to get his thoughts on playing Metroid Dread on the OLED.
What's going on, Devoted Geeks? Dallas asked me if I could give some thoughts on Metroid Dread by way of the Switch OLED. I was able to acquire one, and it is a great console for those who play on handheld most of the time. If you mostly play on your TV, you're probably not going to find anything really special about this, especially if you're keeping it on the dock all the time. But for Metroid Dread specifically, I really enjoy how it brings that crisp look to everything, and it's going to do that for all the games. But for Metroid in particular, there's these parts on each screen because you'll be traveling on different sections of a map, but there's a lot of these black, dark, like dead spaces throughout. And so what happens is that these parts of the map, they're like look flat black, and it almost feels like the screen is blending in with those parts of the game because of it's a very slim border, and it looks super clean. Also, Metroid Dread is a very vibrant game, I noticed, which is great. And so, like Samus and the Emmys, like they're white in color. Samus has a really cool, sleek look to her this time around, and the Emmys look like they're something out of Portal. But I feel like they brought that color into the game, for the Switch OLED, and there's a couple areas. There's like a cold resistance one and a fire resistance one where you need to have like different suits to survive in those areas. And so what I like is those also add to the color. For instance, in the fire area that I went into, you could see like the lava and stuff in the background, but it was just kind of had this nice red glow to it. It was very vibrant. And I noticed even in other areas, like as you're going through, there's like some caves that have some small critters in them, and I feel like because of the way the screen works and how it blends in with those dead spaces of the map, it helps you focus a lot more on what's going on as far as the action, and kind of brings a nice like range to it. Like, so you're, instead of trying to focus on every single thing all at once, you're able to kind of travel through those areas more and kind of focus on what's ahead of you instead of like these dark spaces that you're not going to go anywhere in. But then there's the speakers of the Switch OLED. Those are really great. I love how crisp and clean the sound is, and it's very loud. I played kind of not at full volume, but just to see how things really sounded, and I've noticed it especially in the sound effects and in a lot of little details. And because the speakers are actually pointing at the player, you get some more of that sound in your direction, and it adds to that immersion. And either way, you can play like that, or now Switch offers the option to use your Bluetooth headphones. They just had that update a few weeks ago. So however you choose to play Metroid, though, it's a great game. The Switch OLED is ultimately a nice luxury upgrade that's not absolutely necessary, but I believe that Metroid Dread and the OLED are a great combination, especially on this particular launch period. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Stay devoted.
So as you just heard from LJ, that is a really interesting experience. Just listening to his review, how bright and how loud it was, I can definitely confirm that it's not as loud as what he was experiencing on his OLED for the Nintendo Switch. Does that mean that it's not playable on Nintendo Switch? Absolutely not. I enjoy playing it completely. However, there is a little bit more of a kick to it, a little bit more of a sheen on the OLED. And if that's something that's important to you, and you're like, man, I want to do that, go get yourself an OLED and rock it out. If you want more information about LJ and Geeks Under Grace, check out their website, geeksundergrace.com, where they have a ton of game reviews done by an amazing team who, this is what they do. They actually review video games in a professional manner, so check that out. So now we're down to the final thoughts, my final thoughts on whether or not you should pick up a copy of Metroid Dread. Now, I've already told you, yes, go get it. But why? Why should you get it? I think you should play this game because, first off, if you're a person who loves story and a completionist, this ties in perfectly with the main canon of Metroid. I alluded to this earlier, where this is the 5th journey. This is not part of Metroid Prime, but rather part of the actual canonical 2D side-scrolling Metroid series, which consists of Metroid, Metroid 2, Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, and now this particular game right here. And I gotta tell you guys, it was really nice. It's nice to be able to play a story all the way through, and it fits nicely in with the world that they created through those games. The game itself is very fun to play, and it pulls you in. I found myself wanting to go back and play it on a regular basis, even when I put it down to go take care of stuff that I had to take care of in the day. I'm a big fan of games that are replayable, and also games that aren't just quick one and dones, like, just a couple hours and you're out the door. I prefer games that take a while. I logged 3.5 hours on this game, and I'm not even halfway done. I really think this is a game that's really built for people who, A, love the Metroid series, love a little bit of action, but want a good story that's going to take a while to play through. The game itself is challenging in a lot of ways, not just with the puzzles, but your boss fights. The boss fights definitely take a while. While they are difficult, they're not impossible. It just takes a little bit of time of figuring out the system that's in place, but they are fun and exciting all the way through the experience. At this particular moment in time, I'm going to rate Metroid Dread a solid 8 out of 10. It's a fantastic game. I want to encourage you to go pick it up and enjoy it. But I want to know your thoughts. Have you played Metroid Dread? Do you enjoy it? Do you not like it? What do you not like? What do you love? What was the hardest thing about the game? Because there's a lot of difficulty that takes place here. Leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Before we sign off though, I do want to give a special thank you to all of our patrons who help support Geek Devotions on a monthly basis and help to partially sponsor this particular review. And if you would like to help us to review more things, more video games and books and movies, consider checking out our support page at geekdevotions.com. I also want to invite you to check out all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just look for Geek Devotions. We pop up really, really easily. Until next time, guys, stay devoted. Peace and love.